Providence Firefighter battle with the mayor, the union's perspective tonight. Welcome to My State of Mind. I am Dan York. It is a pleasure to have you aboard. Paul Doughty from the Firefighter Union will be my guest coming up in a handful of minutes here, so stick around. In the meantime, let us go to the rundown and check on some of the things that are happening in the world, and we just keep doing this, don't we? Yep, we just keep doing this, don't we? It is amazing. Look at CBS's coverage of the Donald.
Donald Trump's latest policy proposal is the most controversial yet.
Calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
The crowd at the Trump rally cheered, but his opponents are outraged, calling Trump unhinged, ridiculous, divisive, and offensive.
He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. And you know how you make America great again? Tell Donald Trump to go to hell.
But Trump defended his stance and says he's doing what's right.
We have people out there that want to do great destruction to our country, that want to do great, they want our buildings to come down, they want our cities to be crushed.
Whether it's in spite of past controversial statements or because of them, Trump continues to lead in nearly every poll.
And in this case, where his support comes from is people who are afraid that there are going to be more terrorist attacks.
Before this latest comment, Republican voters viewed Trump as the candidate most capable of handling foreign policy matters.
There is a complete disconnect right now between anything that would be even close to referred to as establishment politics and the people, at least in the pocket of the Republican primary voters. I mean, look, that group of Republicans that just lashed out, it doesn't get any tougher than that, right? Even our Massachusetts governor, Charlie Baker, is shaking his head over this whole thing.
I have no idea what the motivation is on that, but first of all, it's unrealistic. Secondly, it's inappropriate. And third, it doesn't make any sense. I just sat here, okay, and celebrated. Yes, I just sat here and celebrated the miracle of Hanukkah, which is about religious freedom and the fight of the people of Jerusalem to ward off a bully who is trying to take away their right to peacefully practice their faith. And I can't believe that I'm reading this, which is basically directly in contrast and in conflict with most of the most important values that people in this country hold most dear. Among them, the right and the ability to practice your religion peacefully. Yeah, I think this is a really bad idea.
All right, now clearly, Governor Baker is viscerally upset about this, and it keeps loading in. The St. Petersburg, Florida mayor tweets out he's barring Donald Trump from coming into his city. The Philadelphia Daily News throws this one out, and that is a classic. And then even Hillary, via her Instagram, gets into the action. Look, this is, I don't know where this is going to go, but I know this. It's a conundrum. The media feeds Donald Trump. Donald Trump has kind of this way to cut through. He'll say what he has to say at a podium at a coverable event. So there's no filter. And bang, it gets reported, and then he comes on in his own narcissistic fashion, defends his point of view by considering anybody that contests it to be a functional idiot. And the people who criticize him are functional idiots, according to him. And so he actually builds adrenaline on the criticism, because one of the things that a narcissist does, as I understand the psychology of it, is he's completely in denial about ever misspeaking or being wrong, and feeds on the aggravation that comes to him. It's kind of like the Blob. We're on the radio today on WPRO weekdays noon to 3 trying to figure out what the sci-fi movie is of the character that, you know, you keep attacking, but it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Look, there's a disenfranchised, angry, and fearful public out there that just feels the vibe and isn't paying attention to the details. And I will tell you, the more that these Republicans now beat the tar out of him, the higher his numbers are going to go to a certain level, and I don't know where that is. You know, and his point of view on Muslims, if you want to have that conversation, I don't have the time for it tonight. We'll focus on it a little bit more tomorrow on the radio and here tomorrow night on the television. I think Charlie Baker probably said it best. All right, let's move on here. The Supreme Court, just I wanted, because there's a lot of gun control conversation. We had a conversation about that last night. Here's an LA Times headline. And you should understand, and there's a Twitter here from the tweet from the Supreme Court as well. Just know that in all this conversation about what kind of guns we can and cannot use, that the Supreme Court voted 7-2 not to take an appellate case out of a Chicago suburb that was arguing a local ordinance that limited the ammunition that you could have with a semi-automatic rifle and the kind of gun that you can use. And what is the meaning of all this? So you should do some reading on this because it's interesting. What the Supreme Court is saying is, listen, local authorities have the right to kind of set the pace on what kind of guns can be used, purchased or legally owned. You know, amidst all of the atmosphere, it's not getting a lot of attention, but it's something that you really should pay attention to, and we'll have a program on that coming down the line sooner than later. In the meantime, it is being, well, I don't know what, I don't think I've seen anything like this around here in quite some time, what's going on with the Providence Firefighters. Here's a front page story in the Providence Journal today. It is a firestorm. The Commissioner of Public Safety, Steve Perry, continues to just get after this in a big way. Here's a pretty good report by Perry Russum, and he found somebody who actually might have, surprisingly, a guy who can't pay his fines at the Elections Commission for late filing is the guy that's got the most brains on this thing right now.
As the issues between the Providence Fire Union and Mayor Jorge Elorza continue to pile on, the City Council President says there has to be a steady hand running the fire department.
We've had a revolving door of fire chiefs there over the last few years. We need a steady hand in the fire department with the litigation that's ongoing, the back and forth, the animus between the administration and the union.
The back and forth went back and forth again this weekend. That's when the fire department was understaffed for 2 shifts. The mayor has made the accusation certain firefighters worked together to make sure the empty spots weren't filled, and that's against the law. The fire union has denied the claims.
If he has evidence, show it. Because what they're trying to do is create a different storyline rather than his mismanagement of the fire department.
We are now learning the city council has stepped in. They've hired a consulting firm to analyze the staffing challenges the department is facing.
We will cooperate fully with the consultants, and I'll await the results.
This weekend's controversy is another battle under the umbrella of the platoon shift change. The mayor switched the structure from 4 to 3, and he's been fighting with the union about it ever since. Aponte says we've come to the point where there has to be a cooling off period between the feuding sides.
And I think that it also is incumbent on the public to call on both sides to, you know, let's disarm ourselves for a second and let's figure out if we can come back to some fruitful conversations.
Yeah. Welcome. Paul
you.
Doughty is the president of the Firefighter Union. Louis Aponte seemingly is making some sense to me there. Maybe we'll have him in. I can't believe he actually has an elected position based on his problems with the Board of Elections, but I'm willing even to set that aside to bring some logic into this conversation, because at this point, you are operating in a twilight zone right now. I haven't seen this kind of thing go on since I've been in Rhode Island. Yes, no?
It's bizarre. I think it's unprecedented, and I think it lends itself to some mistakes, both in terms of public safety and in the management of the fire department.
What happened Saturday night or this weekend? What happened?
Since about 2001, the parties at the time, the union and the city, agreed to a provision that said no firefighter shall work more than 38 hours. So since that time, almost a decade and a half.
Straight.
Right, can't work 38 hours continuously. It was to prevent people from being overtired, making mistakes at work, things like that. But basically for the last decade, it's been waived by both sides. They haven't enforced it, and we haven't grieved their violating it. because we've run so short-staffed. That's why we'll always see the overtime numbers shown as an outlier. The amount of money that the city has to pay the firefighters is because they don't have enough total number of firefighters. So on this Saturday, without any notice to me or anyone in the union, they unilaterally said, no one is going to work past 38 hours. So it created a problem that could only be solved in 2 hours. And the way they chose to solve it is to call off-duty firefighters and then ask them to come in. They were never ordered. They were never told they had to come in. 50 firefighters were called at home in that amount of time. They were simply asked, do you want to come in? Well, with only 2 days off, there's no firefighter that wants to come into work on a Saturday night with 1 or 2 hours notice, so they declined. But there was no concerted effort. There was no orchestration. I was hiking with my son. I didn't know what was going on until I got home, and my phone started blowing up. But the portrayal by the mayor is that it was some sinister plot by the union. The only thing that changed, the only factor that changed, was the enforcement of the 38-hour rule, which left firefighters in the station who had worked more than 38 hours, willing to work, willing to stay, willing to solve the problem. They were all sent home, and the city ran at a staffing of 76.
So chicken or the egg, I'm trying to figure out. So they decide to execute the 38-hour rule, thinking they can, save on the overtime and have guys come in on call. They completely misjudge the nature of it based on your description.
That's right. And
then they suggest that there's a whole bunch of conspiracy and irresponsibility going on out there within the firefighter ranks. And not having the proper minimum manning is all your fault. I honest to God, I'm begging Commissioner Perry. I'm literally begging him. I've had a great relationship with him, I think, over the course of time. Steve, could you please come in here and explain what you guys are trying to do? Because this doesn't have to be a one-sided conversation with the firefighter union president, who's always been accessible to us. I don't understand what they were trying to accomplish. Can you even try to project it, go on the other side and try to figure out what they were trying to do?
The only thing I could figure is there are a ton of nuances in terms of staffing the fire department, on how callback is ordered in, who can work, when they can work. And without a fire chief in the middle there, it's left for City Hall to make that decision. And it's my opinion that they couldn't anticipate the result. They thought it would be easy to call people from home. There's even some confusion about whether the city ordered the chief to call or not. The chief is very clear, the working chief, the battalion chief, was never told to order any of the firefighters that did answer the call.
And then when it didn't flush out, and some stations had to close temporarily, correct?
That's right. 2 fire stations that have 1 fire truck in it were closed. The lights were shut off. They were in the process of hanging signs on the door that said, "This station's closed. Call 911."
And so now there's a innuendo of possible prosecution here. We'll talk about how that affects the morale, and we'll talk about the case itself when we come back. Stay with us. With Paul Doughty from the Firefighter Union in Providence. So we've got this discussion from the city now, and they're getting the headlines. Because anytime you make an accusation or threaten an accusation, you're going to get a lot of attention, right? So City Hall is throwing out the innuendo that, hey, you know what, there could be prosecution of some firefighters who did not come in on Saturday night. And you're saying that there wasn't even an official order for them to come in on a Saturday night. So there's no insubordination to be proved there.
No.
They had a strategy that fell flat. Well, I don't want to answer all your questions, but it seems to me they had a strategy that fell flat.
It fell flat, and then they went to what their playbook says, and that's spin it out, blame the firefighters. So they came up with this grand conspiracy scheme that has no merit. If you look at the facts, we can prove all the staffing sheets, the phone calls.
Listen,
none of what they allege happened.
The acrimony is so high, and we'll talk about the case which has actually caused all this here in a second. Paul's been on reviewing this case with me now on probably 3 or 4 episodes of the show. Again, without the perspective of City Hall, and at some juncture, Commissioner, at all, the taxpayers are going to want to know what your perspective is here. It's called talking to the people that put you in the jobs that you have, Mayor, Commissioner. But anyway, does this roll off the back of the firefighters? Because at this point, you guys are in such a rock fight. but you know, being threatened with possible prosecution can't be motivating.
No, my members don't like it. Unfortunately, at this point, we've gotten used to it. I mean, it is his go-to play. Every time, it's like Tom Brady's 2-minute drill. Every time they get caught sideways on an issue, they'll throw out some allegation of criminality, investigations, some innuendo, and then they'll just kind of leave it out there.
Unresolved.
Unresolved, unproven, not substantiated. This last night, I called the mayor out. I said, if you have someone to prosecute,
well, we saw you on the package.
Prosecute them.
Understood. It's got to be not only nerve-wracking, but it doesn't feel like it's fighting fair. Because what it does is, look, I mean, not all unions are the same. I think in this particular case that it was a ridiculous decision to pull this 3-platoon move without doing their homework. I think they're going to lose in the courts. We'll see how it all goes. But it just seems like they're playing a public relations and marketing strategy against the firefighter union rather than having salient points to make about you guys not holding up to your end of the bargain.
Absolutely right. That's exact. This is all about playing to the public, and whether we win or lose in the public is really immaterial.
Well, the point is, Mike,
this is a legal argument, a legal fight that's going to be won or lost in court. It's going to have an impact on the city.
Firefighters have the spiritual relationship with the taxpayers when fires are fought and when tragedies happen and when emergencies occur. Outside of that, you guys, as an industry, are fighting kind of a losing. You're not on the right side of the winning side, I should say, of the pollable reaction. People are fed up on some things, and so they're banking on that. It seems to me, because if you'd study the facts of this case and this dispute that you guys have, they're on a weak leg.
Especially when you look at the merits of the case, the legal merits of the case. All they have is the ability to change the public conversation about it.
I want to talk about the case, but let's talk about a couple other things that aren't helping your thing. Steve, can we put up a headline where the commissioner's also on the front page of the Journal taking on this Captain Tom Kenny? He's a longtime veteran, has been out for a long time, and Perry positions him as being off more than on in his career, more or less, and he's soon to retire. He's a squeaky wheel. Is he helping or hurting you?
Well, without weighing in on the merits of it, at times when members speak, the emotion that they feel, it comes out that way. It comes out emotional, and often it's not helpful.
If you read the story, he's been out, injured, disability, whatever. The allegation is that he may. I'm not going to read the story. You can characterize it for yourselves, folks. But is that another weapon?
I think yes. I think it's another weapon in the public relations battle.
This particular captain and his track record is consistent and reflective with the rank and file, or an anomaly?
It's absolutely an anomaly if it's true. And that's the strategy they use. Is they use the outlier. They use the one bad apple. They'll throw out that innuendo that we're all like that. And you saw that in the op-ed as well.
And then you get the Sorrow case, and we've got the B-roll of the famous Target 12 case, where this gentleman was on disability and working out like a champ. It looked like an Olympic athlete, for heaven's sakes. Now, for some reason, he's made a motion to actually come back after quite a few years not on the job, but he was kind of a poster guy for all that's wrong with the firefighter union. Your reaction to that is what?
Again, I think this is a part of the public relations. Is they were so much in a hurry to get him that they missed some important legal steps, and I think the chickens are coming home to roost. It doesn't.
You're not defending his behavior.
No, and I was on here before, and I told you, it doesn't look like there was an injury to me. But I'm not a doctor.
Right.
We've agreed to a process through ordinances, not through the contract. But the council, the mayor, have agreed this is the process. He went through that process.
So you got a captain who's provocative, you got this guy who's been provocative, you got the threat of potential prosecution, and you guys are on your PR heels. I'm guessing that you're confident, though, that you're going to win this case.
Well, we're on our heels, but I still won't walk away. I'm here tonight. Almost any news organization that wants to talk to us, I try to make myself available. So I'm not running away, and I try to stick to the facts. Some of them piss me off, frankly, but I'm going to own it. I own it.
All right. Well, we'll talk about the case itself and give you a couple of highlights. And there's a Supreme Court decision, at least a temporary one, pending any day now. Stay with us. So any minute now, the state Supreme Court is going to make a decision on a request by the city of Providence to stay, meaning hold off on the firefighter union and the city being forced to go into arbitration on the dispute. And the dispute, in case you haven't been paying attention, is the move from 4 platoons, 4 shifts to 3 shifts, and then the pay ensuing along with that. Of course, there's precedent that mayors, local government have management rights to make strategy changes, but it has to be negotiated. You and I have beaten this case down a number of times. The Superior Court judge has already indicated that there's no merit to the city's angle here and has sent this case to arbitration.
That's right.
The city has appealed to the Supreme Court to prevent that from happening.
That's right.
But there's a bigger decision that the Supreme Court inevitably might have to make here.
Right, on the whole nature of, if you can change the shift schedule, can you change the firefighters' pay? We've conceded that they can change the shift schedules. We've never argued that they couldn't. What we say is, if you are going to make me work more hours, you have to pay us.
Right.
That's it. They think that if they change the shift hours, the shift structure, they don't have to pay us
And I
when
can
they
tell
make us
you,
work.
I have not met a lawyer who doesn't think that you will prevail. You're in the middle of a contract, for God's sakes, that runs through
That the mayor will prevail. Right.
No, there's not a lawyer that doesn't think that you won't win.
Right.
You're in the middle of a contract.
That's the distinction with North Kingston. Their contract had expired. It was a free fire zone.
And North Kingston is the precedent that the mayor is relying on. This decision by the Supreme Court, though, to stay the arbitration, I mean, I'll bet you all night rounds of beers that there's no way that they're going to do that, because that would put you right out of business in the entire court case.
But I think it's important, and I think there's some utility for the city to know what the arbitrator is going to say, because if he says no, that they don't owe us any money, then we know that answer. If he says yes, that the city does owe us money, they can start to begin the calculation and decide, are we going to be able to pay it?
Whether or not they want to press the case to an appeal at the Supreme Court.
Correct.
Because the clock will be running, the meter will be running, the expense will be up to here.
Right.
And you and I have kept saying, look, the problem here is that if the city loses, everyone could lose, because the bill could be so big it could send the city into bankruptcy, and you guys may get screwed anyway, because contracts will be null and void based on a bankruptcy.
I could win the battle and lose the war.
Is that the grand conspiracy here?
No, not at all. And listen, I'm not going to give away my playbook, but there's ways to avoid that.
The city's conspiracy.
I don't think so. I mean, if you go to bankruptcy, the mayor gets deposed, the council gets deposed. I don't think either one of them want that.
You'd go back and meet with them any day, right?
Yeah, remain available. We need a real offer.
You think the councilor's idea for this consultant is a good idea?
I do. I think it changes the narrative of what's going on. It lets an independent voice. It's not their side. It's not our side. So I'm open to cooperating with the consultant and seeing what he says.
All right. Well, we'll have to see what happens next step in the case, but crazy times.
It sure is.
That's all I can say. Love to have the city's perspective. The seats are cooling for you. Thanks, Paul. We'll be right back. Last word. I wish Mayor Elorza would think through the train wreck that he's got going with this Providence firefighter problem, but you as a taxpayer really ought to make the point that you don't want disaster. Tomorrow, most likely, we'll take a look at the challenge for American Muslims here, and I'll see you on the radio at noon on WPRO. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.